She had learned early that silence was safer than hope. Leora moved through the obsidian palace like a shadow, barefoot on cold marble, eyes lowered, breath shallow. To the nobles she was invisible. To the guards she was expendable. To the other servants she was the girl who never complained even when the work bled into her bones. Orphaned, poor, and bound by debt, she had accepted the maid's uniform as her fate. Tonight's banquet was worse than usual. Vampire nobles filled the great hall, their laughter sharp and cruel, their jeweled goblets heavy with blood wine. The autumn convergence meant excess, and excess always spilled onto servants like punishment. Leora kept her hands steady as she poured wine at the high table. She knew the rules. Never look up. Never speak unless spoken to. And never ever draw attention. Fate ignored rules. A noblewoman flicked her wrist impatiently, knocking the tray. Crystal shattered. A shard sliced Leora's palm. Pain bloomed. Blood followed. The scent changed everything. The hall went still, not loudly but instinctively. Vampires lifted their heads like predators sensing prey. Leora's heart slammed as she tried to hide her bleeding hand, but it was too late. At the head of the hall, the vampire king looked up. King Valar Nocthar had ruled for 3 centuries. He was feared not because he raged, but because he never did. His presence alone crushed rebellion. His silver eyes missed nothing. And now they were fixed on her. Leora's knees weakened. Shame burned hotter than fear. She expected punishment. Exile. Death. Instead, something impossible happened. The king inhaled sharply. Not hunger. Recognition. His body went rigid as if struck by memory. The blood on Leora's hand glimmered faintly, old magic stirring, ancient and forgotten. A bloodline thought extinct whispered through his senses. The hall held its breath. Valar descended from the dais, each step echoing judgment. Nobles parted in stunned silence. Leora trembled, lowering herself to the floor, pressing her forehead to the stone. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Please forgive me." The king stopped before her. "Look at me," he said. His voice was calm, but beneath it lived something shaken. She obeyed. Their eyes met. And in that moment, Leora did something no one had done in centuries. She spoke without fear. "You're tired," she said softly. "Not of ruling, but of carrying everyone alone." The words fell like a blade of truth. Gasps rippled through the hall. Advisors stiffened. Guards tensed. The king stared at her, unblinking. Then slowly, before nobles, elders, and enemies alike, King Valar Nocthar lowered himself. One knee. Before a maid. Shock thundered through the palace. "I know that blood," he said quietly. "And I will not let it kneel unseen." Leora's world tilted. She had entered the hall as nothing. She left it as something ancient had remembered. By morning, the palace no longer felt like stone and candlelight. It felt like teeth. Leora woke in the servants' quarters to whispers that didn't stop when she entered the corridor. Faces turned away too quickly. A bowl clattered to the floor. Someone muttered, which under their breath as if the word could protect them. She kept walking, chin down, palms sweating, trying to pretend last night hadn't happened. But last night had become a weapon. The moment the vampire king bowed, the court had rewritten her into a threat. In the kitchens, the head stewardess shoved a pile of linens into Leora's arms hard enough to sting. "You think you're special now?" she hissed. "Careful. The palace eats girls who forget their place." Leora didn't answer. She never answered. Silence had kept her alive this long. Still, her hand ached where the cut had been. Not from the blade, her wound was already sealed, but from the memory of the king's eyes. Not hungry. Not cruel. Something worse, something human. Recognition. She tried to lose herself in chores. Scrub. Fold. Carry. Disappear. Then the royal summons came. 2 guards in midnight armor appeared at the servants' corridor, their presence freezing everyone in place. "Maid Leora," one said without expression. "You will come with us." Around her, the servants stared as if she were already condemned. A few looked jealous. Some looked frightened. One girl silently pressed a charm into her own pocket like Leora's shadow could infect her. Leora's feet felt numb as she followed the guards through halls she was never meant to walk. They led her past stained-glass windows and carved pillars that depicted victories over human kingdoms. Past doors that smelled of old wealth and older secrets. Finally, they stopped before a black iron door etched with a crest of a crowned moon. The king's private study. The guards opened it without knocking. Inside, the room was dim and vast, lit by a fireplace that didn't crackle so much as breathe. Books towered like walls. A single table stood at the center, covered in scrolls, maps, and sealed letters. And there, near the window, stood King Valar Nocthar, watching the winter gardens as if he could command the seasons to stop. He didn't turn immediately. "Close the door," he said to the guards. The door shut with a heavy finality. Leora's pulse raced. She stood stiffly, unsure whether to kneel. Her instinct screamed at her to bow low and vanish. But last night had changed the rules. The king faced her. Up close, he seemed even less like a monster and more like a storm given shape. His silver gaze lowered to her hands. "Show me," he said, calm but edged with urgency. Leora hesitated, then slowly raised her palm. Valar's eyes narrowed at the faint shimmer beneath her skin, like a thread of moonlight trapped in blood. "That glow," he murmured. "It shouldn't exist." "I don't understand, Your Majesty," Leora whispered. "I know." His voice softened, and the softness startled her more than his power ever could. "That is why you're here." He moved toward her, slowly, deliberately, telegraphing every step like he didn't want to frighten her. When he stopped, he was close enough that Leora could feel the cold aura of him, and something beneath it, restraint. "There are bloodlines older than my crown," he said. "Bloodlines that were erased from history." Leora swallowed. "I'm just a maid." Valar's gaze sharpened, as if that sentence offended him. "You're a maid because humans are placed in chains and told that is all they are. The palace chose your role, not your blood." Her throat tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like she mattered. He reached into a drawer and drew out a small glass vial. Inside was a single dark drop, blood preserved with ancient magic. "My blood," he said quietly. Leora's breath caught. "You want me to?" "To confirm what my senses already know." Valar held out the vial. "But I won't command it. I won't force you." The most powerful vampire in the realm, offering a choice. Her fingers trembled as she took the vial. "If I taste it, you may see what I hide," he said, eyes steady. "And if you do, you'll understand why the court will try to destroy you." That fear in his voice, controlled, buried, made Leora's chest ache. Slowly she uncorked the vial. The scent rose like winter wind, cold, sharp, and impossibly lonely. Leora touched the drop to her tongue. The world shattered. She fell, not physically but inside herself, into visions that rushed like flood water. A boy, small, pale, standing over a woman's grave, fists clenched, refusing to cry. A young king kneeling before an altar, swearing an oath to protect peace between vampires and humans, while elders whispered that humans were lesser. A massacre in a human village, screams swallowed by smoke, ordered not by Valar but blamed on him. A throne room filled with nobles smiling as they plotted. And then, something deeper. A memory locked behind centuries of silence. A woman with eyes like moonlit water. Human. Dying. Her hand on Valar's cheek. Her whisper, "Our blood must remain hidden. If they discover it, they will use it." Valar's face, young, broken, bowing his head to her as if she were his queen already. And then the truth struck Leora like a bell in her bones. The extinct bloodline wasn't extinct. It had been hunted. Because it was royal. Not vampire royalty. A bloodline that could bind vampire and human without chains. A bloodline that could challenge the old laws. Leora gasped, stumbling back into the present, nearly dropping the vial. Valar caught her wrist, gentle, steady, keeping her from falling. His touch was cold, but his grip was careful, protective. "You saw her," he said quietly. Leora's lips parted, shocked. "You loved a human." The words were dangerous. Treasonous. The kind of truth people died for. The king didn't deny it. His eyes gleamed with pain so old it felt carved into him. "I loved her, and I failed her." Leora's heart pounded. "And, my blood?" Valar released her wrist slowly, as if frightened of his own need to hold on. "Your blood carries the same signature. The same moon thread. The same." He swallowed. For the first time the king looked uncertain. "Say it," Leora whispered. Valar's voice dropped, almost reverent. "You are connected to her line." Leora's knees weakened. "How? I'm nobody." "Nobody," Valar repeated softly, and something in him hardened, not against her but against the world. "That is what they told you. That is why they allowed you to live." He turned away, jaw tight. "The elders will not tolerate this. Lady Valerie's the High Advisor, she will call you a manipulator. A curse. A threat." As if summoned by her name, the study door burst open. Lady Valerie swept in like a blade dressed in velvet, her ancient beauty sharp with calculation. Behind her stood 2 council lords and a priest of the old blood laws. "Your Majesty," Valerie said, eyes flashing toward Leora. The court demands an explanation. The human maid has already sparked unrest. Rumors spread faster than fire. Valor stepped between them and Leora, without hesitation. She is under my protection, he said. Valerie's smile was polite, poisonous. Protection is earned. Leora's stomach tightened. She realized in that moment, the king hadn't brought her here to punish her. He had brought her here to shield her. Valerie's took a step closer, her gaze cutting into Leora like frost. Tell me, girl, what did you do to make a king kneel? Leora's voice shook, but she forced herself to stand straight. Her whole life she had bowed. She had swallowed cruelty. She had been trained to shrink. But she remembered the vision of the human woman dying, begging for her bloodline to remain hidden. And she remembered Valor's eyes last night, not as a monster but as a man begging silently to be seen. So Leora spoke the truth, not to provoke but to survive. I didn't make him kneel, she said softly. He knelt because he finally heard something honest. The room went deadly quiet. Valerie's smile vanished. And Valor, Vampire King feared by all, lowered his head slightly. Not in submission. In respect. That single gesture ignited the room. The priest stepped forward, voice cold. By old law, if a human carries forbidden blood, she must be tested. If she is a vessel for dangerous power, she must be contained. Contained. Leora understood that word. She'd lived it. Valor's eyes turned to ice. No. Valerie's gaze sharpened. Then you will break your own laws for a maid? Valor answered without raising his voice. I will break 1,000 unjust laws to protect an innocent life. The council lord stiffened. The priest's face twisted. Valerie stared, calculating. And Leora, poor powerless Leora, realized the truth. This wasn't just about her blood. This was about a king choosing to be better than the world that shaped him. As the room charged with threat and politics, Valor reached behind him without looking, and opened his hand toward her. An invitation. A promise. Leora hesitated only a heartbeat. Then she stepped to his side and placed her hand in his. The court would call it rebellion. But in Leora's chest, it felt like the first breath of freedom. The trial was announced at dawn. Not whispered. Not debated. Declared. By midday, every corridor of the Obsidian Palace buzzed with anticipation. Servants huddled in corners. Nobles gathered in glittering clusters. Elders arrived draped in ceremonial black, their expressions carved from certainty. The word justice echoed through the halls, but Leora knew better. This was never about justice. It was about fear. She stood alone in the antechamber, dressed not in her maid's uniform but in plain white linen, the color reserved for the accused. Her hands were bound loosely with silver thread cord, not enough to hurt, but enough to remind her of her place. Every instinct told her to apologize for existing. She did not. The doors to the high hall opened with a groan that felt like judgment itself. Inside, the room rose like a cathedral of power. Stone pillars etched with ancient victories loomed overhead. At the far end stood the blood dais, a circular platform stained dark from centuries of ritual. Above it, the council seats formed a half-moon of authority. And at the center, the throne. Empty. A murmur rippled through the hall. They had done it on purpose. Lady Valerie stood first, her voice smooth and sharp as glass. Bring the human forward. Leora walked. Every step echoed. Every eye followed her. She felt the weight of centuries pressing down, trying to force her spine to bend. She remembered nights scrubbing floors until her fingers cracked. Remembered being blamed for things she hadn't done. Remembered learning that survival meant silence. Not today. She reached the blood dais and stopped. State your name, the priest commanded. Leora, she said clearly. Valerie's tilted her head. No family name? I was never given one. A few nobles smirked. Valerie smiled as if satisfied. As expected. The priest lifted an obsidian blade, thin and ceremonial. By ancient law, blood shall reveal truth. If the human carries forbidden lineage, the blood will respond. Leora's pulse thundered, but she did not step back. Proceed, Valerie said. The blade sliced her palm. Pain flared, but then something else followed. Light. Not bright. Not violent. Soft, silver blue, blooming beneath her skin like moonlight through water. A gasp tore through the hall. Whispers erupted. The blade trembled in the priest's hand. This is impossible, someone muttered. The runes carved into the dais ignited one by one, reacting not with aggression, but with recognition. Valerie's smile faltered. The bloodline, the priest whispered, horror creeping into his voice. It answers the old symbols. A noble lord surged to his feet. That line was purged. Erased, another snarled. Burned out of history. Leora swayed. The glow intensified, spreading up her arm, pulsing with a steady rhythm. Alive, not attacking. Valerie's recovered quickly. Control yourself, she snapped. Power does not equal purity. Dangerous bloodlines seduce before they destroy. She turned to the hall. This girl has already manipulated our king. Who knows what chaos she will bring if allowed to live freely. Murmurs of agreement spread. Then a voice cut through the noise, calm, cold, absolute. Enough. King Valar Nocthar entered the hall. Not from behind the throne, but from the side passage, walking among the court like a judgment come to life. His presence slammed into the room, silencing every whisper. His gaze went first to Leora's bleeding hand. And something dark stirred in his eyes. You did not wait for me, he said to Valerie's. You did not summon me, Valerie's replied smoothly. This is a matter of law, not. Valar ascended the dais in 3 long strides and took the throne. Then he leaned forward. This is a matter of my kingdom. The hall froze. He looked at Leora, not with pity, not with hunger, but with something steady and grounding. Does it hurt? He asked quietly. She shook her head. No. That answer fractured something in him. Valar turned back to the council, his voice ringing with restrained fury. You speak of danger, yet you dragged a defenseless human before a blade without my presence. You speak of law, yet you forget who enforces it. Valerie's eyes hardened. Your Majesty, sentiment clouds judgment. That blood can bind. It can weaken us. It can. It can unite, Valar interrupted. Gasp. He stood. For centuries we have ruled through fear, he said, voice echoing through stone. We taught ourselves that strength meant domination. That humans were lesser. And what did it earn us? Silence. Endless war. Endless loneliness. He descended from the throne and walked to Leora's side. You want to know what her blood does? He continued. It doesn't enslave. It doesn't corrupt. It resonates. It responds to honesty. To compassion. Valerie scoffed. You would gamble our future on a servant girl? Valar looked at her with glacial calm. No. I would trust it. He turned to Leora, his voice lowering. Tell them what you felt. Fear clawed at her, but then she remembered every night she'd been told she was nothing. Every time cruelty went unanswered. She lifted her glowing hand. I felt grief, she said softly. And hope. Pain but not cruelty. This blood doesn't want power. It wants connection. A noble laughed bitterly. Pretty lies. Before Valar could respond, something unexpected happened. The runes flared brighter. The dais responded to her words. A shockwave of light rippled outward, knocking several nobles back. The priest dropped to his knees, trembling. It's choosing, he whispered. The old magic, it's choosing her. The hall erupted. Valerie's composure shattered. Seize her. Guards surged forward. They never reached her. Valar stepped in front of Leora, power rolling off him like a storm finally unleashed. Shadows bent toward him. The guards froze mid-step, pinned by invisible force. This ends now, Valar said, voice thunderously calm. Any hand raised against her is a hand raised against me. He looked across the hall, meeting every gaze. And I will not be merciful. No one moved. Valerie stared at him, breath shallow. You would risk civil war. Valar didn't look away. Then perhaps it is time this kingdom was tested. He reached back without looking. Leora took his hand. The glow softened, fading into a gentle warmth between them. For the first time the hall saw it clearly, not a monster and a maid, but a king standing with the powerless. Valerie's withdrew slowly, eyes burning with hatred. This is not over. Valar nodded once. I know. The court dispersed in shaken silence. As they left the blood dais behind, Leora realized something terrifying and wonderful. She was no longer invisible. And the world would never forgive her for it. The palace did not forgive. It waited. After the trial, the obsidian palace grew quieter, but it was the kind of silence that crawled. Servants avoided Leora's eyes. Corridors emptied when she passed. Doors closed softly behind her. Fear had changed direction, and now it pointed at her. Valar had ordered her moved from the servants' quarters to a guarded wing near the inner gardens. For your safety, he'd said, his tone gentle but unyielding. Still, Leora slept poorly, every shadow whispering threat. The attempt came on the 4th night. Moonlight spilled through her chamber windows, painting the floor silver. Leora sat awake, fingers curled around the blanket, sensing something wrong, her blood humming faintly beneath her skin like a warning bell. The air shifted. She heard it then, a breath that wasn't hers. The blade came out of the dark, aimed straight for her heart. Instinct, not fear, moved her. Leora rolled from the bed as steel sliced fabric where her chest had been a heartbeat before. She hit the floor hard, pain blooming, but she was alive. A cloaked figure lunged again, faster than human, slower than a king. A vampire assassin. "Stay down," the figure hissed. Something ancient answered inside her. Leora threw up her hand. Light exploded. Not blinding, binding. The assassin froze mid-strike, wrapped in shimmering silver threads that pulsed in time with Leora's heartbeat. The magic didn't burn. It held. Footsteps thundered in the corridor. The door burst open. Baylor. He crossed the room in a blur, shadows tearing forward with him. One look at Leora on the floor, alive but shaken, and something in him snapped. The assassin tried to move. They never got the chance. Vaylor's power slammed down like judgment. The silver threads tightened, forcing the attacker to their knees. "Who sent you?" the king demanded, voice deadly quiet. The assassin laughed weakly. "You already know." Vaylor's jaw clenched. "Lady Valerie's." He didn't kill the assassin. That choice surprised even him. Instead, he turned to Leora, crouching in front of her, his hands hovering, hesitant as if afraid to touch her without permission. "You're hurt," he said. "I'm okay," she whispered, shocked by her own steadiness. "I stopped them." His gaze flicked to the glowing thread still binding the assassin. "You didn't stop them," Vaylor corrected softly. "You protected yourself." That distinction mattered. Guards dragged the assassin away. The chamber fell silent again, broken only by Leora's breathing. Vaylor stayed kneeling before her. For a moment he forgot the crown. Forgot the watching world. There was only the woman who had nearly died because of him. "I failed you," he said quietly. Leora shook her head. "No. You believed me. No one's ever done that before." Her words struck deeper than accusation ever could. He reached out, this time not hesitating, and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was cool, but reverent. "You should be afraid of me," he said. "Of this world." She met his eyes. "I was afraid long before I met you." Something fragile passed between them then, an understanding built not on power but on shared survival. Later, in the council chamber, Vaylor made his move. He convened the court at dawn, the assassin's confession laid bare. Valerie stood accused, her mask finally cracking under the weight of truth. "You conspired to murder a protected citizen," Vaylor said. "You used the old fear to justify violence." Valerie's lifted her chin. "I protected the throne." "No," Vaylor replied coldly. "You protected your control." He stripped her of authority in front of the court. Not with rage but with law. The same law she tried to weaponize. Instant karma came quietly. Valerie's was exiled to the borderlands, alive, powerless, forgotten. The court shifted that day. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But fear began to lose its grip. That night, Vaylor stood with Leora on the eastern balcony. The gardens below breathed softly, moonflowers opening in silence. "You saved yourself," he said again. "And me." She frowned. "You didn't need saving." He looked at her, something raw in his eyes. "I did. I just didn't know it until you nearly died." A pause stretched between them. Then carefully he placed his hand over hers on the stone railing. She didn't pull away. The bond between them settled, not claimed, not declared, but chosen. In the darkness of a palace that had tried to destroy her, Leora realized something profound. Power did not make someone worthy of protection. Kindness did. The kingdom did not change overnight. But it did change. After the assassination attempt, something irreversible had shifted in the Obsidian Palace. Fear no longer flowed in one direction. Servants stood a little straighter. Guards hesitated before cruelty. Nobles spoke more carefully, watching the throne instead of assuming it would always shield them. And at the center of it all stood Leora, still human, still gentle, but no longer unseen. The final reckoning came at the gathering of bloodlines, a convocation held only when the laws of the realm themselves were questioned. Elders arrived from distant strongholds. Records long sealed were brought into the light. Ancient runes were awakened for the first time in centuries. Leora stood beside King Vaylor before the assembly, dressed simply, her hands unadorned. She had refused jewels. Refused silk. Power, she had learned, did not require decoration. The bloodline you erased, the High Archivist announced, voice trembling, was never treasonous. It was inconvenient. Murmurs spread like fire. It allowed choice, the Archivist continued. Balance. Union without domination. That is why it was hunted. All eyes turned to Leora as the ancient magic responded to her presence, not with command but with harmony. The runes glowed softly, recognizing her not as a weapon but as a bridge. Valor stepped forward. For centuries, he said, voice steady, we called oppression order. We called fear strength. And we called obedience peace. He looked at Leora then, not as a ruler addressing a subject, but as a man acknowledging an equal. This woman did not conquer us. She reminded us. The elders bowed their heads. Not to a king. To truth. The declaration that followed reshaped the realm. The old blood laws were dismantled. Humans within vampire lands were granted protection under crown law. Servants were recognized as citizens. And the ancient bloodline, Leora's bloodline, was restored, not as royalty by force, but as guardians of balance. After the assembly, as the palace emptied and history settled into place, Valor found Leora in the moon garden. She stood among the flowers, quiet as ever, staring at the sky. You could have claimed a throne today, he said. She smiled faintly. I don't want one. That answer, more than any prophecy, told him everything. I don't want to rule you, he said softly. Or own you. Or cage you with crowns. He took a breath, something he rarely needed but chose to do anyway. I want to walk beside you. If you'll have me. Leora turned to him, eyes shining, not with awe but certainty. All my life, she said, people decided what I was worth. Today you asked. She reached for his hand. I choose you. The bond that formed was quiet. No explosion of magic. No conquest. Just warmth, steady and real, settling between them like a promise kept. The palace would remember many things. The trial, the exile, the rewritten laws. But history would remember this most of all. That the Vampire King did not fall in love with power. He fell in love with kindness. And that the girl who once scrubbed floors taught an immortal ruler how to finally stand down from loneliness.